may not work tomorrow. But those seeking to wreak havoc are already changing their tactics to evolving threats that require that we constantly adjust what we do at our airport screening checkpoints and on our airplanes. Finally, we need to stay on top of growth in air travel and changing travel patterns so that TSA and its partners are not caught like they were recently dealing with logistical challenges that they aren't prepared for. That's why strong leadership is so critical to seeing us through these very challenging times. Leadership's a lot like integrity. Alan Simpson used to say, integrity, if you've got it, nothing else matters. Integrity, if you don't have it, nothing else matters. The same is true as leadership. And I think we're blessed with enlightened leadership and grateful to you, Admiral Neffenger, for your willingness to serve. This burden is not just for you and your team to bear. This is a shared responsibility. Each of us needs to do our part. And if we do, we'll be much safer as a nation. Let's roll. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Carper. It is the tradition of this committee to swear in witnesses, so if you'll all rise and raise your right hand. You swear the testimony you will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Please be seated. Our first witness is Admiral Peter Neffenger. Admiral Neffenger is the Administrator of the Transportation Security Administration, the TSA. Administrator Neffenger manages a workforce of nearly 60,000 employees, is responsible for security operations at approximately 440 airports throughout the United States. Prior to joining TSA, he served as the 29th Vice Commandant of the U.S. Coast Guard. Admiral Neffenger.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Carper, distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I sincerely appreciate the committee's oversight and support of TSA and our important counterterrorism mission. Since taking office on July 4th last year, I have traveled extensively to observe our operations and meet with our employees. And they are truly impressive. Their patriotism, their sense of duty, their commitment to our national security mission is exemplary. And when I appeared before the committee nearly 1 year ago, I committed to addressing the immediate challenges we faced in our security mission while positioning TSA for the future. And to that end, over the past 11 months, we have undertaken a systematic and deliberate transformation of TSA. Our strategy has included 3 complementary elements. First, focus on security effectiveness. In the wake of the Inspector General's findings, that was our fundamental mission, and that is our most important mission. Second, resourcing to meet demand. And third, transforming the system. We are holding ourselves accountable to high standards of effectiveness, and we're supporting our frontline officers in their critical counterterrorism mission. We've renewed our focus on security. We've revised alarm resolution procedures. We have ceased risky practices. We've retrained the entire workforce. And we've retooled our performance measures to ensure we stay focused on our critical security mission. With Congress's help, we overhauled our approach to training at all levels of the agency, including leadership training. And we established the first ever TSA Academy on January 1st of this year, with initial course offerings focused on training frontline transportation security officers. This intensive training enables TSA to achieve consistency, develop a common culture, instill core values, and raise performance across the entire workforce. Second, we are resourcing to meet demand. With help from Congress, we halted the reduction of our screening workforce this past year. We are making investments in new technology, converting part-time officers to full-time, shifting screeners and canine resources to high-volume airports. We've begun hiring federal air marshals consistent with our new concept of operations, and we're conducting our operations more effectively. We completed a review of personnel policies and practices, which led to a number of significant changes. And we are designing a human capital management system to address recruitment, development, promotion, assignment, and retention. Third, we are transforming TSA in fundamental ways to ensure a mature, enterprise-wide approach and an agency prepared to address the very real and sustained terrorist threat. We've reinvigorated partnerships with the airlines, airport operators, and the trade and travel industries, and we're working closely with Congress to address the ongoing security mission demands. We're overhauling management practices across the agency. We conducted an independent review of our acquisition program. We're building a new planning, programming, budgeting, and execution process. We're modernizing. Among other initiatives, our innovation team is taking advantage of existing technology to establish automated lanes at selected checkpoints. And as noted, through a public-private partnership with Delta Airlines, we've recently installed 2 new automated lanes. These were done in just 9 weeks, and these became operational last month in Atlanta. Initial results show dramatic improvements. We have similar projects planned with other major airlines and airports in the coming months. This year, TSA will screen some 742 million people projected. By comparison, in 2013, TSA screened 643 million people. So our approach to screening requires a similar transformation, and we are meeting that challenge head-on. With the support of Congress for our recent reprogramming request, we have brought on board 768 new TSA officers. Our federal security directors have redeployed behavior detection officers as needed to screening functions. We've placed additional K-9 teams at our highest volume airports and activated our National Volunteer Deployment Force to surge to airports of greatest need. And we're beginning to see positive results. For example, nationwide over Memorial Day, 99% of passengers waited less than 30 minutes in standard security lines. 93% of passengers waited less than 15 minutes. And in pre-check lines, 93% of passengers waited less than 5 minutes. Over that 6-day period of this last Memorial Day, we screened 10.3 million passengers. That's a 3% increase over the same period last year, and we did so effectively, and we did so in a way that protected the system. 4 factors, in my opinion, have contributed to our ability to move people more efficiently and effectively through checkpoints. First, the new resources that we received from Congress through the reprogramming and other proactive efforts have allowed us to effectively open more checkpoint lanes at peak periods to manage the volume. Second, we placed a strategic focus on the 7 largest airports in the system because if you can prevent problems from happening there, you don't have problems that cascade throughout the system. Third, we established a National Incident Command Center. This allows us to focus daily on screening operations hour by hour at the 7 largest airports to look to see what the challenges are as they develop and to move resources in near real time to address those challenges. We've now expanded that to the top 20 largest airports, and this is a full-time command center which will stay in operation. And finally, we are conducting daily operational calls from that command center, airport by airport, with the airports, the airlines, and the federal security directors to ensure collaboration, information sharing, and real-time movement of necessary resources. None of this would have been possible without the tremendous efforts of our frontline officers. They've performed admirably, and they always deserve our thanks. But we are not celebrating, and we're not letting up. Passenger volume will remain high throughout the summer, and we'll need to continue to manage resources aggressively. In the short term, TSA, airlines, airports, Congress, and travelers working together can improve the passenger experience while maintaining security. I'd like to thank the airlines and the airports in particular for hiring staff to support non-security duties in the airports. But longer term, we know we have to continue to right-size TSA to ensure we meet the demands being placed upon us. We look forward to working with Congress to get it right, both in terms of staffing and developing new approaches to aviation security. Our frontline officers are focused on their security mission. It's up to us to ensure that they have what they need. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today. Thanks for the committee's support, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Admiral Neffenger. Our next witness is Mr. John Roth. Mr. Roth is the Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security. Before joining the Office of the Inspector General, he served as the Director of the Office of Criminal Investigations at the Food and Drug Administration. Mr. Roth.
Thank you. Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Carper, and members of the committee, thank you for inviting me here to testify this morning. About a year ago, I testified before this committee at a hearing about TSA. During that hearing, I testified that we remain deeply concerned about TSA's ability to execute its important mission. At the time, I testified that TSA's reaction to the vulnerabilities that our audits uncovered reflected TSA's failure to understand the gravity of the situation. Since that time, we have conducted more audits and released more reports that challenge TSA's management of its programs and operations. However, I believe that we are in a different place now than we were last June. As a result of our audit reports and a vigorous response by DHS, TSA is now, for the first time in memory, critically assessing its deficiencies in an honest and objective light. TSA's leadership has embraced the OIG's oversight role and appears to be addressing vulnerabilities. However, we should not minimize the significance of the challenges that TSA faces and the risk that failure brings. The stakes are enormous. Nowhere is the asymmetric threat of terrorism more evident than in the area of aviation security. TSA cannot afford to miss a single genuine threat without catastrophic consequences, and yet a terrorist only needs to get it right once. Fortunately, TSA's response to our most recent testing has been significant. DHS and TSA has instituted a series of changes well before our audit was even final. As part of that effort, TSA initiated a Tiger Team program that resulted in a list of 22 major corrective actions that TSA has taken or is planning to take. We are generally satisfied with the response we have seen at TSA. These efforts have resulted in significant changes to TSA leadership, operations, training, and policy. We will continue to monitor TSA's efforts to increase the effectiveness of checkpoint operations, and we will continue to conduct covert testing. In fact, we have a round of covert testing scheduled for this summer and are presently developing the testing protocols. Consistent with our obligations under the Inspector General Act, we will report our results to this committee as well as other committees of jurisdiction. We applaud TSA's effort to use risk-based passenger screening, such as PreCheck, because it allows TSA to focus on high-risk or unknown passengers instead of known vetted passengers who pose less risk to aviation security. However, while reliance on intelligence is necessary, we believe that TSA in the past has overstated the effect of reliance on intelligence and a risk-based approach. The hard truth is that in the vast majority of time, the identities of those who commit terrorist acts are simply unknown to or misjudged by the intelligence community. What this means is that there's no easy substitute for the checkpoint. The checkpoint must necessarily be intelligence-driven, but the nature of terrorism today means that each and every passenger must be screened in some way. Unfortunately, TSA made incorrect budget assumptions in 2014 and 2015 about the impact that risk-based security would have on its operations. For the administration's 2016 budget, for example, TSA believed that it could reduce the screener workforce by more than 1,600 screeners, full-time employees, stating that risk-based security requires fewer resources and would allow TSA to transition to a smaller workforce. Likewise, in the administration's FY 2015 request, TSA asked for a reduction of over 1,400 full-time screeners based on claimed deficiencies in risk-based security. However, our testing and audits found that TSA had been incurring unacceptable risks in its approach, and TSA has now eliminated some of the more dangerous practices that we identified. Moreover, we believe that even if TSA had not changed its approach to screening, the planned decline in screener workforce was far too optimistic. As a result, the long lines that we are seeing this summer are not mysterious. TSA, because of the decisions it made in 2014, have fewer screeners but are facing more passenger volume than ever before. We will continue to examine TSA's programs and operations and report our results. In addition to the new round of penetration testing, we are in the process of conducting a number of audits and inspections, including a look at the Federal Air Marshal Service, their use of behavioral detection officers, and TSA's oversight of the badges that are used to get access to secure parts of the airport. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my testimony. I welcome any questions that you or other members of the committee may have.
Thank you, Inspector General Roth. Our next witness is Ms. Jennifer Grover. Ms. Grover is the Director of the Homeland Security and Justice Team at the Government Accountability Office, the GAO. In this position, she oversees GAO's reviews of TSA programs and operations. Ms. Grover.
Good morning, Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Carper, other senators and staff. In recent weeks, travelers, members of Congress, and others have raised concerns about long airport security lines. As you've both noted this morning, one of the challenges inherent in TSA's mission is the tension between taking the time to do the job right and moving passengers through as efficiently as possible. But first and foremost, TSA is responsible for ensuring transportation security. My statement today will focus on 2 points. First, changes that TSA made to improve the security effectiveness of its expedited screening programs, which likely contribute to today's long lines. And second, new information showing that TSA should improve its oversight of screener performance to ensure that screeners are carrying out their task accurately. First, regarding expedited screening. As we've heard already this morning, TSA has made recent changes to tighten security that likely contribute to the long screening lines. In November 2015, TSA modified its risk assessment rules, which reduced the number of passengers that were automatically designated as low risk. At the same time, TSA cut back significantly on its use of managed inclusion, which is used to divert non-PreCheck passengers into the PreCheck lanes when they would otherwise be underused. TSA still uses this program at airports where passenger screening canines are available, but has discontinued its use otherwise. According to TSA, these changes were necessary to improve the security of their expedited screening programs and resulted in a 20% decrease in the number of passengers receiving expedited screening. Despite the concerns that TSA has made, GAO continues to be concerned about the effectiveness of the remaining managed inclusion program. We await the results of tests that TSA is planning to evaluate the security effectiveness of the program, as we recommended in December 2014. My second point is about TSA's oversight of its screener performance. Our recent review of screener training and testing showed that TSA could improve its oversight of the screener's ability to identify prohibited items. TSA conducts tests to monitor screener performance. However, we found that much of the testing data was missing over multiple years. For example, screeners are regularly tested on their ability to identify images of threat items hidden in carry-on baggage, and TSA policy requires FSDs, who are the local TSA officials, to submit the data to headquarters. In every year from 2009 through 2014, TSA headquarters did not receive any of this data for a substantial percentage of airports. We recommend that TSA ensure that FSDs submit complete image testing results to headquarters as required for airports across the country to confirm that the screener image testing is being carried out as intended and to allow for future national analysis of the data for trends that could inform screener training. We also found that TSA's covert test results are not reliable. FSDs conduct covert testing at airports on a regular basis, but when TSA headquarters brought in a contractor last year to independently perform the same tests, the contractor obtained noticeably different results. Specifically, screeners performed more poorly on the tests conducted by the contractor. TSA is in the process of determining the root cause for the differences, but initial results suggest that FSDs may have trouble obtaining anonymous role players to keep the tests covert. TSA has briefed its FSDs on the results and continues to work with the contractor to examine the issue. In conclusion, TSA has taken positive steps to improve the security effectiveness of its expedited screening programs, though these changes likely contribute to today's long screening lines. Yet more work remains for TSA to ensure that screeners are carrying out their task accurately. TSA should improve its oversight of screener performance by more effectively collecting and monitoring screener testing data and by ensuring the reliability of its covert testing data. Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Carper, this concludes my statement. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Grover. By the way, I appreciate the attendance, but because we have pretty strong attendance, we'll limit questions to 5 minutes. And I'll start. Admiral Neffenger, we're putting an awful lot of weight on the expedited screening procedures, TSA PreCheck, that type of thing. What metric do you use, or what do we know about what is the faster throughput of that program?
So the difference between an expedited lane and a standard lane, you roughly, at peak, if you have an efficient team working it, you can move about 250 people per hour through a pre-check lane. It's about 150, 160 per hour through a standard screening lane.
So it's about a 75%, that's just off the top of my head.
Sir.
I mean, it's pretty
It's a significant improvement, that's right.
What percent, because we know the number of people that are signed up for pre-check, but we don't know how often I don't know how often they travel. What percent of passengers currently are in TSA pre-check?
Well, on a daily basis, we move about 30% of the traveling population through pre-check lanes. So that's a combination of people who have signed up for pre-check, people who are in cleared populations like Department of Defense individuals who hold security clearances and the like, and then a very small piece based upon rules.
And we're all concerned a little bit about that algorithm, correct? I mean, this is what Inspector General and GAO were a little concerned about that. I guess call that managed inclusion.
Well, actually, I wouldn't call that managed inclusion. Managed inclusion was the practice of taking truly unknown people and randomly assigning. Okay. We don't do that anymore. So these are people who are looked at. They're looked at through a rules-based calculation, assigned a risk value. Again, it's a very small population.
But you're looking at that because we're a little concerned about that, correct?
Yes, sir.
I do know there are about 200 adjudicators that are waiting to be approved by TSA. I know in Milwaukee, people can't sign up and get their application, they can't apply. There's, I think, about a 45-day waiting period. Where are you at in terms of approving those adjudicators so more people can sign up for TSA PreCheck?
Well, we've been working very closely with the vendor. We actually have all the capacity we need to approve it. As long as we get a completed application, they have to fill out the standard form that we all fill out for security clearances. If we get a completed application, then we can process that application inside of 7 days, and that's the turnaround that we have right now.
I do know they're waiting at the Milwaukee airport. That application office is clogged, so.
Well, I'll check on that one in particular.
I appreciate
Yes,
that.
sir.
Where are we at in terms of new technology? I was interested, you talked about 2 new automated lanes in Atlanta. Can you describe those in greater detail?
I will. So these are 2 lanes. This is existing equipment. This is equipment that I first saw when I visited London Heathrow Airport last year. Essentially, if you just think of the current system, it's a fully manual system. You have to push your bag along a table. You have to engage the conveyor belt at the X-ray machine. Then you've got to pull your bag out the other side. And it's a single file system. You're in line behind whoever's in front of you, and until their stuff moves through. So first, it's an automated conveyor belt, so it's an automated roller system, an automatic bin return. There are 5 stations at which individuals can stand, so you can move 5 people at a time up to the checkpoint. As you put things in your bin and push it onto the conveyor belt, you can cycle right in. So there's no waiting for the person in front of you. And then on the other end, it has an automatic divert. The bins have RFID technology on them, so they're tracked to the individual. It makes it much easier to divert a bag if there's an image of concern, and it pulls the person whose bag has been diverted off the line. Bottom line is we are seeing, just in the initial phase of operating these 2 lanes, about a 30% increase in throughput at the same level of effectiveness. It also allows us to be much more effective on our end. To GAO's point, one of the problems that we have is giving real-time, right now, feedback to an officer on their performance. This does that. It allows us to do real-time performance monitoring.
Are you looking at just better detection technology, better than the AIT machines, or
Yes,
are
sir.
you really exploring that?
Yes, sir. In fact, what we're looking at is the next phase would be to incorporate what so-called CAT scan technology, computed tomography technology, in the checkpoint. So we now have a couple of approved systems that we can put in. We're looking to pilot one of those this summer. That gives us a much more defined ability to see what we're looking. It's a system we use in check baggage, and it's a substantial improvement over the X-ray.
We held a hearing on the dogs at DHS, and what I've learned, I'm incredibly impressed by. Again, the ability, the nose of a dog. There's no technology that can beat it. Where are you in terms of trying to beef up the number of canine units we have?
Well, as you know, TSA itself operates about a little over 300 canine teams, of which 148 have been trained to do passenger screening. My goal is to get the rest of those trained for passenger screening. That'll take about another 8-9 months or so. But I'd like to see a total of about 500 dog teams. That would allow me to really address the highest volume airports in a very efficient way.
Okay, I want to be very supportive of those efforts. Senator Carper.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Neffenger, I want to go back to a conversation you and I had several weeks ago. There have been long waits and a lot of frustration at O'Hare, and I urged you to go there and to see for yourself what had happened, what had gone wrong. And I want to thank you for going. Tell us what you found, tell us what has been done, and what lessons that you learned have you been able to take away and to spread to other airports, to other security stations across America.
Well, thanks for that, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about that earlier. There's a couple pieces of that answer. The first is what happened at Chicago. That was truly, in my opinion, and in my investigation, it was just a failure to get enough lanes opened in advance of what was an anticipated significant increase in volume for that day. It was sort of the first day of the volume season. We saw about a 13% increase in volume from the previous week, and we didn't have enough lanes open. And once you're behind, it's very challenging to catch up. So the first thing we did was to look at what caused that, and to make some immediate operational changes. Opening a checkpoint earlier, making sure that the lanes are fully staffed when you do. We put a new temporary management team in, which I'm pleased to say, within 24 hours, really turned that situation around, and we haven't seen a repeat of that. What we learned out of that, though, is that you really do need to pay attention to these large hub airports. And out of that really came the development of a daily National Command Center focused specifically on screening operations. We've always focused on our daily operations, but you need to really look at screening, checkpoint by checkpoint, at the major airports across the country. And in this case, we decided to focus for the Memorial Day weekend on the 7 largest airports. These are the big multi-hub airports where all the traffic originates, essentially. And if you start to have problems in one, you're going to cascade it across the system. And so by doing that, by taking the resources that we were able to get put into place as a result of the reprogramming, overtime hours, new hires, as well as converting people from part-time to full-time, we dramatically increased the staffing available, and then we watch it very carefully on a daily basis to make sure it's applied to the right location. So the lesson learned out of that was that you have to be laser focused on the actual operations, airport by airport, at the largest airports, and you can't let yourself get behind, because once you're behind, it's like a traffic jam. It's very challenging to clear it out.
All right. Thanks very much. I talked earlier about leadership, the importance of leadership. I think we're blessed with leadership that you provide. Talk to us about your ability to put around you the kind of leadership team that you need in order to lead TSA, and also the flexibility you have to put in place, whether it's O'Hare or other airports, the kind of leadership teams that will better ensure that we don't see the kind of jam-ups and confusion that we witnessed at O'Hare.
Well, I've made a number of leadership changes over the course of the past year, some just in the past few months. It's critical that you get the right leaders in the right places. For the first time ever, we now have a chief of operations for TSA. Before that, we had a series of operational programs that in my opinion, were not fully integrated, and as a result, you can have a problem that arises without a vision of how to deal with that. So we have a chief of operations now. I have a new deputy administrator, and I have a new chief of staff, and I have a new head of my screening operations section. Those have made a substantial difference, and we made some field changes where necessary to ensure that you have the right people in the right
Good, thank you. The chairman asked about the issue of a pre-check contractor staffing backlog. I've heard some reports that there was a backlog, and the folks that actually vet the TSA pre-check applicants, there weren't enough of them, and there was a delay as much as 40 days in doing that vetting process. And I think I just heard you say earlier in response to our chairman's question, that's really a 7-day wait, and that's not extraordinary. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we've fixed the problem with respect to clearing the contractors, people who do the vetting work. So we've got a process in place. We can handle anybody they give us, and we can turn it around very quickly. What we're now working with the contractor on is expanding the number of mobile enrollment centers, ensuring that we balance their staffing workload so that they provide staffing to the highest volume locations.
Good. Very, very briefly, tell us, what do we need to do? We're all about doing our job. We want you to do your job. We want your folks to do their jobs. What do we need to do in our jobs to enable all of you to be more effective?
Well, that's a great open-ended question. Well, Congress has been extremely supportive this past year. You've helped us to grow back some staff that we needed. I do believe that TSA is smaller than it needs to be to meet the demands of the system. It was significantly helpful to get those 1,600 people that we were slated to lose back on the books. The TSA Academy has been a cultural game changer for us, and more importantly, this recent reprogramming. We have another reprogramming that's pending. It's been approved by the Senate. It's pending before the House right now, which would allow us to bring on additional staff, and more importantly, allow us to continue to convert more part-time to full-time. Those are very important because that helps us to address the challenge of just getting lanes manned at peak periods. The second piece is this very real need to transform the system. I mentioned those 2 automated lanes. That's an example of the way in which we need to modernize and bring TSA into a 21st century. And this is not technology that doesn't exist, just using existing technology. I have technology, IT backbone systems that have to be upgraded. I need to connect my systems in a way that they're not currently connected. I can't currently see the health of the system because I have independently operating entities out there that can't be networked together because of cybersecurity reasons. And I need to do a better job of getting real-time performance data on my workforce that I currently can't do. It's a very manual system right now. So those are the kinds of things that I intend to bring forward to Congress over the coming weeks to show I think we have a good plan forward and a good strategy for addressing that. It will help us to address a lot of the concerns that the Inspector General and GAO have raised with respect to performance, and their work has been critical in informing how we go forward on this.
In closing, continue to let us know how we can help.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
We are going to do questioning in order of arrival, so Senator Tester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your service, Administrator Neffenger, and I want to thank you for your employees, too. As I've told you before, I do a lot of flying, and maybe with one exception, these folks have been very, very, very professional, and that's over the last 10 years. So thank you very much, not only for what you do, but for the people who serve under you do. I want to talk about advanced imaging technology for a second. We've talked about it before, and the need to get it deployed throughout the country. Could you talk about, and I know you're under budget constraints, and that might be something we can do as it applies to full body scanners, but could you talk about your progress on getting full body scanners to the airports that don't have them currently? How's that progress going?
Yes, sir. Well, we've now identified the number that we need to do that, and let me preface it by saying I agree with you. I think that it's important that we get that capability everywhere we need it, because we know that the terrorist groups are focused on their ability to get into the system.
Weakest link.
And so we're working through the administration right now, Department administration, to put forward what we hope would be a request that would allow us to purchase the additional equipment that we need. Not every place can actually accept one, but wherever we can put one, that's the goal.
Thank you. For the GAO and the IG, have you guys done any research into the effectiveness of magnetometers versus full-body scanners, and whether we should be concerned on this side of the dais with airports that only have magnetometers?
During our covert testing, we sort of saw both types of machinery, and without getting into the details, there is a cause for concern not having an AIT in a specific facility.
Did you find the same, Jennifer?
Yeah, they do different jobs, so they're looking for different things, and they have different purposes. So there is a cost if you don't have an AIT.
Okay, and Administrator Neffenger, you talked about new scanners that you're working on now that will be more effective, which is good for you. I always worry about scanners to know if I'm getting radiated or not. Do you guys have protections? Are there parameters that you work under for under health situations?
Yes, sir. So the scanners that I was referring to are really the ones that are checking the carry-on baggage.
Yeah, but you said there would be similar technology applied to us.
Oh, no, if I did that, I misspoke.
Oh, I misheard you.
No, the technology that we're currently using is non-penetrating. It's just radio waves bouncing off of
Super.
you. So we have no intention of using anything else.
Okay, when I get on an airplane, I look out, and the passengers have went through the magnetometer or the full-body scanner, whichever it may be. But there's people that work for the airlines, there's people that work for the airport. Can you tell me, do they go through the same procedure as the passengers?
Very few go through the same procedures as passengers. So this is a population that has already been vetted against criminal databases and terrorist databases, and they're recurrently so. Some airports do screening in the form of magnetometers and what might be called a stadium check of the bag, and then they're subject to random screening throughout the day. But the passenger screening environment is unique to the passengers.
It's more intense than the people who work there, would you say?
I think for passengers, remember we know something about these individuals that have badged access. So you're doing continuous vetting of those individuals against terrorist databases and recurrent vetting against criminal databases.
So, Administrator, tell me what recurring vetting means. What's that mean? Are you vetting them monthly, weekly?
Daily. So
Daily.
Every single day, if you hold a badge, you're continuously vetted against the terrorist screening database and the extended categories that feed that database.
So you're comfortable with it? I mean, as the administrator of the TSA, you're comfortable with where we're at on those employees and the folks who work for the airlines and the airports? That's all I want to know. If you're not comfortable, then...
Well, I think there's more work to be done. I think we need to look at we need to keep our eye on the insider population. You know, if you have a trusted population, you need to continuously verify that trust, and you need to do it in a way that is designed to deter, detect, and ideally disrupt.
So when you find contraband items with those employees, do you keep a record of that?
We do. If we find it, we keep a record, and just contraband items, we work with local law enforcement to deal with whatever consequences might result from that.
And so, do you have the ability? If you find somebody that has contraband items, to get them terminated?
Yes, sir. We do.
Thank you.
Senator Enzi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for the testimony that you've done. I go home pretty much every weekend to Wyoming, which means flying, and I tried to get into some businesses there because I found out that any business that I'm not familiar with looks pretty simple until I take a look at it. So that's probably what we see as we go through airports too. But I am worried about the management at the security points themselves. Not for whether they're stopping the bad stuff or not, but whether they're getting people through the lines. Several times I've found a manager at one of these checkpoints and asked them some questions, like why they had 3 people training one person at how to look at a driver's license, instead of having 2 of those people helping somewhere else. I also find 2 check podiums for one line to be able to get through the screening. So they're continually holding up the line because if they let more people through, they get stacked up and can't get through the X-ray machine to begin with. And yet there'll be another line over there that's not being used with X-rays. So I'm always wondering why the management doesn't say just open one podium if we are going to only open one line through there. Or otherwise, take that second person from the podium and help to staff a second line over there. I'm just not seeing any, and I'm seeing the lines growing and growing behind me. And my result of when I've called in about some of these things has been a call later saying, when you're coming through the airport, if you'll just let us know in advance, we'll make sure you get through security. I want you to know that's not the point. The point is I want my customers to be able to get through the line just as easily, and I want to be able to do that. I've also seen one screener taking 3 times as long to look at the screen for the item coming through and calling for somebody to do a bag check on almost everything that comes through, and nobody checking to see if that person is just extra careful or if they're actually finding those kinds of things. Also at Dulles, I really like the little sign that they have that says how many minutes of wait at the different lines. One of the things that fascinates me here in D.C. is that almost everybody's pre-check. Yeah. So the regular line is usually 1 minute. The pre-check line is 20 minutes. Now, in Casper, Wyoming, when you go through, they don't have a pre-check line and a regular line. But if you have pre-check on your ticket, they hand you this orange card that you can take through with you. And then you have the same thing, except for having to remove your computer, you have the same thing as if you were in a regular pre-check line. And it kind of expedites things. So instead of taking regular people and putting them in a pre-check line, sometimes maybe we ought to be taking pre-check people and putting them in a regular line, giving them an orange card so that they can be expedited. Another thing that I hear frequently is, why are there so many people that don't appear to have anything to do at the checkpoint? And my suggestion on that is the same as is that if they don't have anything to do, is there some kind of a collection point where they can be out of sight at the moment so that people aren't counting how many people are just standing around? And then there's a pool to draw on when there's another use for them. So I guess what my question is, besides observations that I've done, is there some kind of an incentive system for people to suggest improvements, people that work for TSA to suggest improvements, and how does that incentive system work?
There is, and to your observations, one of the things that I've found, that we've found, is that by focusing, as I said, daily on screening operations, you start to identify some of those challenges that maybe you've seen. I suspect that those are problems here and there. Because we're not seeing that big across the system, but what we can do is rapidly identify those kinds of problems and then get the best practices out there. So it is about frontline leadership, it's about supervisory leadership, and it's moving the measuring performance and then moving those measures of good performance to other places. So that's been very helpful. We do look for I happen to believe that that frontline people are probably some of your best source of information for how to improve a process, because they see it, they live with it every day, and in fact, when the people who are now operating those new automated lanes down in Atlanta first took a look at it, our transportation security officers immediately found even more efficient ways to operate it because they instantly saw how much they could do differently as a result of that. So we do have a program. I'm happy to give you, for the record, a kind of a detail on how it works and how we collect information and the kinds of information that has come in, and then how we put it to use back through the system.
I appreciate that. My time's expired, but I will be submitting some questions on rural airports where they have very few passengers and some things that could be done there. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Enzi. Senator Ernst.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Senator Ayotte for allowing me to jump ahead here in the questioning. And thanks to all of our witnesses. You all have a very important job. We want to make sure that our constituents, not only are they traveling comfortably, but we also want to make sure that they are traveling safely. So thank you for taking on the roles that you have. Administered Neffenger, it seems as though a lot of the issues that we're seeing, a lot of the underlying problems for TSA come from simple mismanagement of resources. We've heard a number of them today, and so I do think that's something that we need to really hone in on. In Inspector General Roth's written testimony, he noted that recent audits reflect issues with TSA's stewardship of taxpayer dollars. And as a straightforward example, and this is pretty blatant, but recent media reports revealed that TSA spent tens of thousands of dollars on a mobile application, and maybe you know where I'm going with this, with the randomizer. It's a mobile application called the randomizer. And it's an arrow on the screen of an iPad that randomly tells passengers to go to the left or the right line. And this is government spending here. This is the epitome of wasteful Washington spending. And what we would like to hear is how you will assure us and the American people that TSA will take those taxpayer dollars and be responsible stewards of those dollars.
Well, Senator, thank you for that question. So I found that pretty outrageous, too. As you know, that app was purchased, I think, in 2013 timeframe, and we don't use it anymore because we've stopped that process of randomly including people. I'm very concerned about that. One of the things I did when I was in the Coast Guard was work on reforming our entire acquisition process, really setting clear requirements for why we do what we do, ensuring that those requirements lead to capability, and ensuring that you don't buy capability that you don't need at a higher price than you should be paying for it. And so when I first got here, within the first month, I brought in the Defense Acquisition University, which is, is a semi-independent arm of the Defense Department that looks at how we do government procurement. And they conducted a pretty in-depth review over about a 3-month period of our acquisition program. They've made a number of substantive recommendations, which we are beginning to put into place now, and we're working with the department and our other overseers to do that. I don't want to see us spend that kind of money. The money that we have is so critically important to the mission of security that I don't want to see any of it wasted as we go forward. And I've committed to being as open and transparent as I need to be with not only our current expenditures, but the things that we have carried forward from the past to ensure that we don't do that, and have invited oversight in to take a hard look at that. So I'm fully in your camp on that score. I can't justify some of the actions that were taken in the past, but I can assure you that I will, at least under my watch, I'll keep them from happening again.
Yes, we certainly can't blame you for previous years' administration, but just the thoughtful approach that you're taking is very much appreciated by many of us, and we hope that we can see that at all levels through the TSA, and we hope to see continuous improvement. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. Senator Ayotte.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank all of you for being here today. I wanted to ask Admiral Neffenger, there were some pieces of the reauthorization bill of the FAA that recently passed the Senate, including an amendment that I was part of to address insider security threats, as well as an amendment that is focused on the TSA PreCheck Enhancement Act to ensure that you are able to expand that program. Are both of those pieces important to get passed?
We're supportive of both of those pieces of legislation. They codify some things that we're already doing. I think that's important because you want to ensure that you put good institutional practices in place for the future. So both of those are positive for TSA.
Good. Well, I hope that the House will take up the FAA reauthorization. I wanted to ask about, Admiral, as you state that they're concentrating on improving TSA protocols, retraining and refocusing the workforce, and driving technological improvements. But one thing that you haven't really mentioned as an existing tool that could do that is the Screening Partnership Program, where TSA acts as the oversight entity but not the security operator, contracting with security companies. And so what I've heard is that there's long waiting lines to get applications approved, and that the TSA attitude doesn't seem to be that supportive of this program. Particularly as we look at this program, just to use an example, in Portsmouth at the International Airport at Pease, that is an SPP airport and one of 22 airports nationally in the SPP. Unfortunately, what I've heard from my local airport is that TSA has imposed contracting limitations on Pease and the security contractor that limit the flexibility of staff at the airport to respond to dynamic needs. So I guess I would like to know, it seems to me when we've seen, for example, the implementation in San Francisco of the SPP partnership, are you interested in also looking at a vibrant screening partnership program? And how does the agency see SPP as a way to consider reducing lines? So what is your view of this program? And I do have a follow-up because having looked at what the Inspector General and also the GAO has looked at on this program, I know there's an outstanding issue where TSA has not shared with the Congress or with those who are looking at oversight the cost estimates so that we can, as policymakers, really compare the SPP programs versus the TSA fully run programs and decide, you know, what's the most efficient, effective way to have security at the airports.
Well, thanks, Senator. And when I came into this job, I was very interested in understanding the SPP program better. As you know, that's a program that an airport can request to bring in a private contract screening workforce. That workforce is contracted to the federal government through
Right.
TSA, but they can choose to do so if they like. And I've been committed to making that as straightforward a process as possible. In fact, we've streamlined significantly the application process over the course of this past year, so that they don't have long waits. It's governed certainly by the federal acquisition rules, so there's a certain amount of wait that's required just for the announcement, the bid process, and so forth. But we've streamlined that significantly. I don't know the problem in Portsmouth, and I'll look into that for you because I'm not aware of the specifics
Well, I
of that case.
appreciate it.
So I will check into that. I would hope it's not the case that there's anybody making it more difficult. We are officially neutral. If an airport wants to go to a private screening contractor, we will work with them to ensure that.
So one thing I wanted to follow up with Ms. Grover on is, as I understand, even though Congress has made this request, the TSA has not yet reported cost comparisons between the federal and the private screening at SPP airports to us as policymakers. Is that true?
At the time of our report, which was in November 2015, that's what we found. I don't know if TSA has taken actions over this past winter, but we did recommend that they should provide regular information to you about the relative costs.
To my knowledge, it's not been produced, has it been, Admiral?
Well, we have a deadline at the end of this month to provide to GAO those costs. So we have done that. It now includes what are the so-called imputed costs. The issue was that we were using just the cost to TSA, but it didn't include, retirement costs and so forth that the rest of the federal government would pick up. So now the imputed costs are those things that are outside the TSA budget, but are still cost to a taxpayer for an employee at TSA. That's the piece that needed to be added in to give the full burden cost of
Are we doing any comparison on wait lines between the different programs and how on this issue of management in terms of efficiency between the two programs too? Are we going to get that information?
We have actually done that, and what we're seeing is comparable across the system, whether you're a private screening workforce or a federal workforce. As long it has to do with making sure that the staffing is in place and the staffing allocations are correct. But right now, we're seeing roughly comparable wait times across the whole system, and as I said, really focusing on these. The biggest volume airports has been a dramatic improvement in our ability to manage lines effectively.
Well, I hope with the information being transmitted to GAO that we'll have an opportunity to see that analysis as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator. And I'll tell you, one thing I love about this committee is the members ask great questions. And I want a quick follow-up on the SPP program. So, we talked about cost, we talked about the metrics. Is it the exact same process? Are those partners willing to, are they able to do it a different way, or they do it the exact same way that TSA does it?
No, they do it. So they train with TSA, they train at the TSA Academy, they're trained to the same standards, and you have a federal security director, a TSA employee who manages the contract of that workforce, or works with the contractor to manage the workforce. So they should be performing to the same standards across the system, and that's
so there wouldn't be innovation on the part of those partners in terms of screening. I mean, they're really done the exact same way.
Well, it currently is. That's
that
right.
process, I don't want to say imposed, but I mean basically they're required to do it the same way.
There's currently a set of standards provided. You're right. Yes, sir.
Let's see here, Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank our panelists for being here today and for your work. This is obviously tough work. And the fact that you have to find a needle in a haystack based on the numbers that are going through there. But if that needle gets through, obviously the impact could be catastrophic. And so we appreciate your efforts to keep us safe, but also moving us through very efficiently as people are getting on those airplanes. And it's going to take the concerted effort of everybody to make that happen. We have certainly heard the horror story of Chicago, the delays that occurred there, and have happened, I think, on a few occasions. But I want to get a sense of what's happening around the country. Admiral, you talked about your focus on some of the major airports, but obviously we have many, many airports where people are going through. Where are we in terms of the overall system of airports? Are there a number of airports that you're concerned about? How would you break that down as a percentage of places where we have problems in the whole system?
Well, I think that the positive side of this is that we're not seeing problem. If you take the top 20 airports, which represent about 58% of the daily travel volume, these are the big hub airports and then the lesser hub airports associated with it. The remaining 430 or so are really doing pretty well. And I look at this across. So I see the results every airport every day. And we're generally moving people very effectively through the smaller airports. I mean, there every now and then you get a spot problem because you'll have an unexpected surge of people coming through. But for the most part, they're moving very well. Where we've seen the problems consistently have been in those top 20 airports. That's where when you get stories of long wait times, it's there, which is why I really wanted to retool our approach to this to focus specifically on those airports, making sure that you get the resources in there to get ahead of the expected surge of people coming. We get good data from reservation systems and the airlines on who to expect, and make sure that you get your lanes manned at the time. So I think that's the positive side is that if you can work on those 20 airports, you can really, for the most part, solve the problems in the whole system.
Well, speaking of one of those airports, the Detroit airport, which is one that I hear about regularly, I travel through as well. I will say from my personal experience when I've traveled, at least at the times that I've traveled, the volumes have been similar to what I've experienced over the last few years. Although we still get complaints from my constituents, particularly in the morning hours. Could you address a little bit of what's happening in Detroit, the good, the bad, and lessons learned that may be helpful in Detroit as well as other airports?
Well, actually, Detroit's a very good example. One, you have exceptionally strong workforce there, a good workforce, very stable workforce. We've been able to convert more of those to full-time. That's very helpful because that immediately reduces attrition. A lot of people want full-time jobs. When they can't get them, then they leave for a full-time job. You've got a good management staff in place there, and they have strong relations with the airport and the airlines that service it. I was recently in Detroit and had a chance to meet with the various partners in the airport environment. They all had I believe honestly so, had good things to say about our folks there. What we've seen there is that it's really a matter of ensuring that you get a checkpoint opened well in advance of the time that you expect the surge of passengers to come in, that you work closely with the airlines and the airports to manage that surge as it's moving from curb to ticket counter to checkpoint, and then more importantly, that you have fully staffed lanes. So that's the absolute key to doing that. If you can do that, then you can very efficiently move those people through a line while doing the job the way we should and moving them through. So the lesson we learned from Detroit is when they really got ahead of that. And if you noticed over Memorial Day weekend, they had exceptionally good numbers going through there. People moved through very efficiently. We didn't have any extended wait times at all there.
Great. And in the remaining time here, Admiral, too, I appreciate your efforts on acquisition reform and procurement and changing those systems. Certainly, it was very disturbing to members of this committee and others with some of the media reports that occurred last year about equipment that was not performing the way it was advertised, and that people were able to get through items in some of the tests that were done for the IG and others. To what extent, going forward, are we going to hold contractors who design and build these machines to much higher standards than they've been held to in the past, and they must be held accountable because we simply cannot accept the types of failures that we have seen in the past?
Well, I spent a lot of time with our major equipment contractors when I first came on board, and we've had a lot of lengthy discussions about performance standards, performance of the equipment, maintenance of the equipment, and so forth going forward. I'm also very interested in seeing more participation by the private sector in the types of things that we're looking at, the types of capabilities that we need. I think that we need more open architecture. We need the ability for some of the really talented, innovative minds out there to participate in increasing our ability to do the job more effectively.
Thank you, Admiral.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Peters. By the way, when you're connecting in Detroit, it's really great for my Fitbit challenges with my wife. A lot of long walks. Let's see here. Senator Langford.
Not as much as Charlotte to help for that, but that's a whole different issue. Thank you all for being here and for your testimony today. I think everyone's reiterated the same thing, and we want to make sure that you hear it loud and clear from all of us. Safety is the primary consideration. We never want there to be a consideration to say, let's speed everything up. In fact, that was part of our conversations even a year ago when you were going through the confirmation process. And the concern with the pre-check line is pre-check had become a pre-check plus another randomized, and we had so many people going through it. It was all about speed, and there was a sense from us to say we're losing a sense on safety. Now, obviously, from the IG's report as well, to come back and say, okay, we're also overly optimistic on staffing, and so we have a drop in staff and we have an increase in passengers, and it's not rocket science to try to figure out why we have long lines to go through that. So I just want to make sure everyone hears loud and clear, we are still focused on safety. It's not just about speed, but there are also plenty of people, myself included, that as we travel through airports, see TSA workers standing around or not in a hurry when people are waiting in very, very long lines. And so I think people understand the safety, but they also want to see some efficiency in the process with that. With that, let me just highlight a couple of things that I want to be able to bring up. One we've already briefly discussed. That's the innovation that happened in Atlanta. And I'd like to be able to talk more about how that could be multiplied. My understanding is Delta Airlines spent about $1 million researching a better way to do the TSA check line in their home airport in Atlanta, developed a system, partnered with TSA, implemented the system. It has proven to be much faster. And for $1 million at that airport, now their check-in is much faster. The concern I have is where do we have more opportunities for the private sector to be able to engage with TSA to help innovate in other areas and to be able to not only put private sector folks in places that are non-security, but better innovation in the process as well.
Well, thanks for that question. This is where I see the greatest promise going forward. Originally, the whole idea came about as a result of seeing some of the work that has been done in Europe to create more efficient, more automated systems as you move through. In discussions with a number of airports and airlines shortly after I came in, I said I was looking for opportunities to partner to do some innovation pilots. Originally, it was just that, hey, can we do a couple of pilot projects? Delta Airlines offered to jump in and purchase a couple of these automated systems. This happens to be one that's currently in use at Heathrow Airport. And they move very quickly, and you're absolutely right. Just these first 2 lanes alone have shown tremendous promise in terms of improving efficiency. About a 30% improvement by their own count on what we go through. So I think that that is certainly a critical element of transforming the system. Other airlines and airports have come forward and said they want to do the same thing. So now I put together an innovation project team. Which is focused specifically on these public-private partnerships, managing it so that you don't want to create a hodgepodge of systems out there. You really want to do something that makes sense, that takes advantage of existing technology, not just to automate the lane, but to look at the technology that can be added to that automation that could eventually lead to, electronic gates to let you into a checkpoint that could move the ID check out to a kiosk, and then you keep the person sterile as they come through. Really building that true curb-to-gate security environment, as opposed to just focusing it all around the checkpoint. I'm very excited. We have a pretty good plan going forward. It's mapped out. We're building the architecture for that now with various airlines and airports that have interested. We've got about a dozen airports that have come forward, along with the airlines that service them, to talk about doing some of this transformation. And this is happening over the course of the next 6 months. So I'm happy to provide you with a more detailed brief on that, but I think you'd find it promising.
I think you'd find plenty of people that are willing to help you innovate in the areas that are the pinch points, like the bags that have been noted, to try to find ways to be able to evaluate how do we actually move people faster through this spot and still keep the innovation we have. With the innovation, the technology piece of it, it would still be the expectation, I think, of everyone on this dais as well. Early on in TSA's history, there were a lot of over-promises made by some manufacturers. We over-purchased in some areas, ended up having in warehouses lots of equipment sitting there unused. We obviously don't want to see that, nor have equipment put in place that says one thing and actually can't fulfill what it's stated to actually do. So we want to make sure that process stays in place in all of our equipment. So not only purchasing the right amount, having the equipment that actually can fulfill what it's asked to do. So thank you for that. I ask for your continued attention on things like the TSA PreCheck. In Oklahoma, we had a computer glitch for a while that suddenly you couldn't sign up for TSA PreCheck for a period of time. There are lots of other ways to be able to not only have innovation in getting people through the line, but getting people actually registered for PreCheck. And so we can get that background. So PreCheck is really PreCheck, and more people are able to actually go through that process to be able to be checked off. So I'd appreciate continued attention to that as well from all those contractors around the country that are doing that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I yield back.
Senator Portman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Admiral, great to have you here before us. You're talking to a pretty tough audience here because we're all frequent flyers. And, I go back and forth from Ohio every week, a couple times, I guess. We're also, though, all pre-check, I would think. And so when I'm in the pre-check line in Cincinnati and Columbus and Cleveland, it's a lot shorter. It's not like Dulles or National where a lot of people are in pre-check. And so a lot of the questions we're asking you are about not pre-check, but, how do we be sure and expedite everybody? And by the way, the TSA folks who I deal with every week are courteous. They're professional, the vast majority of them, vast majority. I remember being here at a hearing recently where Senator Carper said he thanks them as he goes through, as I try to do, and I say, thanks for keeping us safe. They look at you kind of funny, like no one's ever said that to me before. And that was your experience too. On the other hand, they do, all work for us as taxpayers, right. And that customer service side of this is also important.
When I say that, people say to me, "Are you Rob Portman?" Not yet.
I go incognito through there, yeah. But you talked a little about the training and performance measurement, and I appreciate your leadership, and I'm glad you're there. We're going to talk a second ago about, what you've done with regard to Mr. Ross' report that came out just before you were confirmed in June of last year. But in terms of the training, just quickly, on the customer service side, what are you doing in terms of measuring performance and training?
Well, that was one of my big concerns when I came in. And in fact, I extend beyond customer service. I call this is what true public service is all about, providing an important service to the public in a way that treats them with respect and dignity, and that recognizes the inherent inconvenience of what you're doing. So that's an important thing to do. So we built that into our new TSA Academy training. So all of our new hires now, there's an entire component on what it means to be a public servant, and what that public is that you serve. I mean, these are people who are your fellow citizens. And there's a part of it where they say, think of these as your family members, assuming you like your family members, but think of these as your family members as they're coming through. So I hope people are seeing, and anecdotally, we're getting reports that people are seeing a difference among the workforce as they come through. And we've done that back through the entire workforce. That takes frontline leadership to make it work. So we're also working on that first-line supervisory leadership training. That's critical. We need to do more of that in TSA. It just hadn't been done consistently.
Well, I appreciate that attitude and that approach, and I know that's your personal approach, and I do think actually it expedites the process as well. I mean, there's a safety aspect to this also, in addition to the fact that it is a matter of customer service for the taxpayers who are inconvenienced. This report last June was incredibly troubling. Mr. Roth hasn't gotten to answer many questions, so I may not give you a chance here either. But I'm going to tell you about your report. 95%. 95%. So in 95% of the time, TSA was not finding dangerous items. Security screeners failed to detect weapons, mock explosives, other prohibited items 95% of the time. Shocking. This is before your time. We also found that there were 73 individuals employed by the aviation industry who were on the terror watch list. And at the time, I did some questions to you as part of your confirmation. You indicated you were going to immediately put in place some things that Secretary Johnson was talking about to address both those issues, and that you were going to look at the more systemic problems. Can you give us a quick report where we are on that 95%? Mr. Ross said that you're continuing to do testing and audits, but you didn't tell us what the percentage was. So either of you, if you could answer that.
Well, I can't talk about percentage of what we're finding in open session, but what I'll tell you is that we're better. As you know, one of the biggest concerns I had was to, first of all, find out why did we have a failure rate of that magnitude. And as it turns out, it was really that we were asking the frontline workforce to do something directly in opposition to what their job was. If their job is to ensure something doesn't get past a checkpoint, well, then you can't ride them about moving people more faster through a checkpoint. And so if I put myself in the shoes of a frontline officer, they're torn between, I'm told I can't hold things up, but I got something to look at. So we've gotten better at that. We retrained the whole workforce, and I think that we're significantly better. I'm hoping that the Inspector General's testing bears that out as we go forward.
Mr. Roth, anything to say on that?
As I indicated in my testimony, we are going to do some covert testing this summer. I will be candid that we have taken a look at some of the red team testing that TSA has done. We think that our testing will be more objective, and I think those results will be more accurate. So we will wait and see what happens.
This committee will be very interested in the results of that test. And in terms of the terror watch list, I assume you're comfortable that that has been addressed?
Yes, and just so we understand, there are two lists. One is the terrorist watch list itself, and the other is the TIDE database, which is the larger list from which the smaller list gets nominated. They did not have access to the larger list. It was largely bureaucratic inertia, not on TSA's part, but on DHS's part, as well as the intelligence community's parts. That has been fixed, and we think that TSA now has all the information it needs to be able to adjudicate those things.
My time has expired, but I'm going to ask a question for the record with regard to Cuba. I'm very concerned about the agreement the administration has made with Cuba, concerned about reports I hear about TSA opening not 8, but another additional 2 airports without any kind of screening that we would consider acceptable, and these are all going to be, as I understand it, points of departure to the United States. I know there's been travel, for instance, from Afghanistan to Cuba and so on, so I'll ask questions for the record on that issue, but I want to express my concern right now that we be sure that those airports are fully vetted and they have the proper security screening in place.
Senator Heidkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for stepping up and serving, once again, your country, Admiral. We really appreciate this, and we were very glad to confirm you. And I can tell you from this testimony and our dialogue, our trust has been well served. But we have some business that needs to get taken care of. And, I kind of tell people occasionally, if you've ever been to a penitentiary and have the warden bring out a box, they have a box of handmade weapons. you know, from toothbrushes that have been shaved off to just simply plastic knives that have been used to kill other people. And so we have to be really careful that we don't overstate, you know, the risk that there is, because even though we're looking for traditional weapons, we let people on with knitting needles. So, you know, we sometimes frustrate the public because they look at this in a lens of common sense. One of the things I want to ask is whether when you look at the metrics, and it's for anybody here, and we look at this transition now to bag fees that has resulted in more people doing carry-ons, I believe, has that been a problem, and is there a way to do pre-screen for baggage, you know, on carry-on that would help the line move quicker, but and also would provide greater security for in terms of what's in the bags?
I'll start the answers on that. The first thing is we've been working really closely with the airlines to the extent possible to enforce the 1+1 rule. It is the case that there's more stuff coming through a checkpoint, more check bag or more carry-on baggage, by definition is going to slow things down. The other thing is to encourage people to really double check their bag, pack wisely.
Yeah.
A prohibited item in a bag of any type causes something to stop for a moment while it's being checked. So we encourage people to double check their bags, make sure that they haven't put anything in there that they shouldn't go. There's very clear information on the website now which says, you know, what shouldn't go in there. If they have any question at all, you can always ask somebody as you come in the airport. So I think trying to keep the number of bags coming through to a minimum, so the 1+1 rule is very important, and many of the airlines are working very hard to enforce that. And then ensuring that passengers just double check before they come through, because it will, one, it's an inconvenience to the individual who forgets that they leave something in there. It is true that we find a lot of contraband items coming through. We had a phenomenal number of loaded weapons at checkpoints last year. It always astonishes me that people forget that they have a weapon in their bag when they come through. So that, from my perspective, is one of the most important things we can do. We're looking at whether there are ways to do something different with carry-on baggage before you get to a checkpoint. But again, that's part of the technology improvement that we're thinking of.
I would really encourage you to think kind of beyond the box on what could happen with carry-on luggage, because more time to screen that. We're all standing in line with our carry-ons, right? Those carry-ons could, you know, with a couple extra lines, be screened ahead of time as we're moving through the line. And I think that would give you more time to actually check the carry-on luggage. You know, I can tell you it's incredibly frustrating when you see someone bring something through that they shouldn't. Just a couple weeks ago, I had a bottle of water in my backpack. You know, how often do I fly and I've made that mistake? And so you just get, you know, you don't always know. And so I want to ask finally about the 2013 GAO report, noting that TSA could not provide evidence to justify its SPOT program, and that's screening of passengers by observation techniques. GAO recommended that Congress should consider the absence of scientifically validated evidence for using behavioral indicators to identify threats to aviation security while assessing the potential benefits and costs in making future funding decisions for aviation security. Obviously, DHS did not concur with GAO's recommendation. My question is, have you reviewed that report, and since you've been there, do you come to the same conclusion as DHS did, Department of Homeland Security did when they initially did the review?
Well, I have reviewed that report, and there's a couple of elements to this that I think are important. So the first thing I did was to figure out, is anybody else doing a behavioral detection of some sort? And so quite a few law enforcement agencies around the world use it. There are other security agencies that do it. So I think that there is some value in considering to look at whether behavioral detection is a valid element to add in. It's never going to be a perfect system. That said, we're looking at how we can more effectively use the people that we've assigned as behavioral detection officers. As I said in my opening statement, we're pushing a lot of those people back into security screening duties this summer. We're having them work with K-9 teams, because I do think that there's some work to be done on validation of the indicators, on the way in which we do behavioral detection. There may be some modifications that we have to make in order to make it more scientifically valid.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point, but it is and can be a very effective tool at checkpoints, at border crossings. There is science to this. The question is, are you applying the right science? Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for the time.
Thanks, Senator Heitkamp. Just pick up, that's really what Israel does, correct?
They do. In fact, a lot of what the Israelis are doing has informed what we're doing, and we've trained with the Israelis on behavioral detection.
But that's a far more intensive process, correct?
It has more elements to it than we're currently using. That's correct.
You know, there are a number of people proposing to force airports or airlines to drop the baggage fees, to force them, allow more people to check bags. Does that really gain us anything? We still have to run those bags through a detection system, correct?
Yeah, it's hard to know whether it would dramatically change the way things are. I think there's more to be gained by reminding people to minimize their carry-on baggage to the 1+1 that the airlines require. That makes things a lot smoother at the checkpoint. I have concerns about the baggage system's ability to handle check bags without some modifications to the way we're currently doing it in some airports. So what I've committed to doing with the airlines and airports is working on minimizing the amount of carry-on, because a lot of that stuff gets gate checked anyhow. I just as soon it doesn't come through the checkpoint if it's going to be gate checked on the plane, and then ensuring that we have the appropriate staff there to handle.
Okay. So again, you're kind of confirming my suspicion that may not gain us a whole lot. And I basically agree with that. I think there's an awful lot to be said for having the passenger with their bag, just in terms of security as well. Without getting into the detail of the failure of the AIT machines, has there been any thought given to an AIT machine followed by a metal detector?
We have looked at that, and in fact, as we look at what I call transformation, but really changing the thinking behind screening, I want to get away from what is essentially a static system. We're looking at systems that integrate that technology. The challenge is that you have to be careful, because then metal detectors set off people with artificial hips. So there may be a way to do it, but we're looking at ways to integrate more of the technology, and that's why I really want to activate the private sector more effectively than we have, because I think that there are ways to do this that are smarter.
Generally, people that know they're going to set off a metal detector can talk about something, but that would really
Yes, sir.
improve security dramatically, wouldn't it, if people went through both?
Go ahead.
General Roth?
Again, the two different machines look for two different kinds
Correct.
of things. And my understanding as far as the TSA's protocols now, when there is an alarm on the AIT that is, for example, suspicious, they have the ability then to run people through.
But again, the failure, again, I don't want to get into detail, but I've seen videos. There's a real problem in terms of what one machine detects and what the other one doesn't.
Correct.
So if you go through both, I would think you'd dramatically increase the level of security.
I'll defer to TSA on that. Our testing hasn't shown that.
Yeah, and what I would say is there's probably, it gets challenging to talk about this in open session, and I'd be happy to sit down with you in closed session to do so, but we are looking at those kinds of capabilities. I'm concerned about what one can do, what the other can't do. I think the K-9s play a role in here, and if I could sit down with you.
Okay, we'll talk about that in
that.
closed
Yeah.
session.
Okay.
And again, I truly appreciate, and again, reading the testimony, it came across very clear. As General Roth talked about, is you're doing a great job at really looking at this honestly, admitting you have a problem, critically assessing what's happened in the agency. So I just want to ask the Inspector General, on a scale of 1 to 10, in terms of critical assessment, we've gone from what to what in terms of improvement?
I mean, we have gone from night to day.
Okay.
And I can't put a
one to
number
9,
on it,
okay.
but we went from a cultural situation where we were fought at every turn to one in which they now embrace oversight in a way that I think is a very sort of positive
So,
method.
so Admiral, that's to your credit, and, thank you for your service doing that. Now, let me ask you the harder question. So that's the first step in solving the problem. How about actual implementation of the solutions? Where are we at? If, let's say we were at 1, where are we at now on scale 1 to 10?
I mean, we have a number of challenges. I will not underestimate it. With regard to the checkpoint and the covert testing, there's a 23-point plan that TSA has put into place. We are generally satisfied with the progress they are making. It is by no means complete, but there are issues not just at the checkpoint. There are issues with regard to TSA as a contract administrator, for example. There's issues as far as TSA as a regulator with local airports. How well are they regulating the local airports? We have considerable concerns about insider threat and the fact that there is while the administrator talked about the recurrent vetting that occurred, the criminal vetting, it's a very static process. You are either convicted of certain offenses, enumerated offenses, or you are not. But there isn't a holistic look at an airport worker who has unrestricted access to aircraft, unescorted, unrestricted access to aircraft. They are either sort of convicted or not convicted. And if they're not convicted, there's no holistic vetting that would occur, for example, that I'm familiar with federal employees, where we look at a whole range of things before we determine whether they're trustworthy.
So I hate putting words in people's mouths, but from a standpoint of taking the first step in solving a problem, admitting we have one, we've really taken that step. But in terms of actually solving the problem, you would say we've got a long way to go?
That's correct. We didn't get into this overnight, and we're not going to get out.
Admiral, you'd probably agree with that, correct?
I would agree with that. I think that we've made some substantial progress in really enumerating what some of these issues are. But these are issues that will take some time to correct.
Trust me, I don't envy you your task. So, again, God bless you for your service. Senator McCaskill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to talk a little bit about senior executive service. And I understand, Mr. Neffenger, that the bonuses that were paid to the former assistant administrator happened before your watch. But there was $90,000 in bonuses paid to the assistant administrator of the Office of Security Operations at the same time that all of those tests were failing, that the IG was conducting the tests and showing that 67 out of 70 weapons got through. And those bonuses were paid in a way to hide them. They were paid over time, obviously, clearly exceeding a 20% cap. I know that you have made changes to make sure that doesn't happen again, but this is really a symptom of this SES service, I think, and the lack of reform that has occurred with the senior executive service. I like to point out every time I get a chance on the record how senior executive service began. And it began, frankly, as an idea that I think the chairman would agree with, that you need to get talent in management and government. So the idea is you would hire competitive with the private sector, and these managers would go from agency to agency and get expertise. Well, that's long since been abandoned. These are people who've burrowed in one agency that hang out long enough to figure out how to get SES, and then they get paid a lot more, and this is where we've seen a lot of abuse in terms of bonuses. So let me ask you this, with your reforms, is there any connection to bonuses paid on whether the agency is succeeding? You know, in the private sector, the bonus pool changes based on how the company did. And that's not been the way in government. I don't think anybody looking objectively of TSA over the last couple of years would say that the bonus pool should be really big. So are you now tying bonuses to the performance of the agency and not just performance of the individual?
It's a combination of both now, and I want to just also preface it by, or add that I've severely limited both the type and the number of bonuses that can be handed out in an agency, and I've put controls on it above me. My concern was that the agency had the ability to independently assign bonuses. I now require department oversight for that, and I've asked the department to do that. So I'm a strong believer in controls. I believe that there's a need to have the ability to give bonuses when people have done good work. I mean, you want to keep good people in government. So the notion and the practice of bonuses is not necessarily a bad one, but it has to be managed carefully, it has to be controlled, and it has to be appropriate.
Because if you look at the data, no one could objectively look at the data and say that TSA has high marks in terms of the things you look at in management, in terms of morale and you know, there just is on all the measurements out there. So I just am hoping, I think you're trying to do better in that regard. I think we need to look at SES reform in a larger capacity, not just at TSA, but I think there's just a lot of issues with senior executive service. I'm also have some serious concerns related to this is whistleblower retaliation. I read with interest the article that was published in April about the high level of whistleblower retaliation at TSA. The case that really struck me was a man took his case all the way to the Supreme Court and won on whistleblower retaliation, that he'd been wrongfully fired, and he lost 10 years. It took him 10 years to win. He lost 10 years of promotions. And TSA said, well, we can't speculate how much he would have been promoted in 10 years. They put him back at his other job, and frankly, he's still getting passed over to this day. I'd ask you, Mr. Roth, how does TSA compare to other DHS components as far as the number of whistleblower complaints and whistleblower retaliation complaints?
We haven't done a study of that. I mean, that's something certainly that would be interesting to know, so I can take that back.
Yeah, and what can we do about the lost years of salary and compensation and promotion for the time period that someone litigates them being treated unfairly?
Well, the individual speaking of did get full back pay for that full 10-year period, along with all of the associated cost of living increases that would have occurred during that time, in addition to other things. So he got a sizable payment for back pay, and it included the cost of living increases. I understand that there is that he has ongoing litigation, so it would be inappropriate for me to comment any more upon that because I want to make sure that he gets the appropriate due process. I'm committed to supporting people who bring forward complaints. I'm committed to them being treated fairly, and I absolutely will not stand for retaliation inside the agency. I understand that there have been allegations of that, and in one case, proof of that in the past. My position is I don't want to inadvertently bias any action going forward. So if you've got pending litigation, we will support that going forward. We'll work with the Office of Special Counsel as necessary, and more importantly, I will take swift action against people if they do something under my watch that indicates that they've retaliated.
I would love a response to the people who are laid out in the New York Times article as to the agency's position on these people and what occurred and how they've been made whole. The woman who was forced to leave her assignment after she complained. There's a number of them in here, as you know. It's pretty damning. And it says it's much higher than, for example, the IRS that has many more employees in terms of the rate of complaints. It went up significantly, the number of complaints. So I want to take a look at that. My time is up. I would say on the record that I hope you're thinking about every airport. You've got a group of frequent flyers up here. Everyone flies home every weekend. No one uses TSA more than all of us because we are flying twice a week coming back and forth to work. And so we see an awful lot in airports. I am bombarded with kiosks wanting to sell me everything from sunglasses to pillows to cases for my iPhone. Yeah, I'd love to see a kiosk for pre-check. I mean, how simple to put up a kiosk in the airport for someone to sign up for pre-check. It wouldn't be that expensive, and frankly, you could probably staff it with, especially in the non-peak hours, with people who are waiting for surges in people coming for flights. I bet you could do it pretty cost effectively at $85 a pop. That's a hell of a lot more than a lot of cell phone covers.
Well, I think the vendor's looking at dramatically increasing the number of mobile sites just for that reason.
Kiosks, not an office somewhere that you've got to go down into the bowels of the airport back by the lost luggage to find it. I'm talking about right there, neon letters with a big smiley face. Maybe we could even sell cell phone covers at the same place. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Carper.
Just to follow up on that, Easy Pass is not the same. We have a much different vetting process with Easy Pass as opposed to pre-check. But when you come into Delaware, we collect tolls on I-95, but there's a fairly easy place, very visible, right on the road to stop off, and if you want to get an Easy Pass, you can. The same thing with our North-South Highway that goes down to our beaches. Easy, just pull off and get yourself an Easy Pass. So I think that's a good idea. I'm going to ask a series of questions, ask for very brief responses, if you will, Admiral. I apologize to General Roth. I apologize to Jennifer for not asking you more questions, but my colleagues have asked several that I wanted to. So thank you very much for the good work that you and your teams are doing to make TSA better, make them better. Admiral, I was struck by the apparent success of TSA's efforts to reduce wait times ahead of the Memorial Day holiday. And according to news reports, we talked about it here today, security checkpoint wait times were mostly average. I think 99% of passengers waiting fewer than 30 minutes to pass through screening, 93% waiting under 15 minutes. Just take a minute and tell us how were you and your team able to cut wait times in such short order?
Really four things. First was we got new resources through the reprogramming. Thousands of overtime hours. We were able to convert people from part-time to full-time. We moved additional K-9 units into the largest airports. So that was the number one. Second was the standing up of a national, we're focusing on the top 7 airports primarily, looking across at the top 20 in addition to that. That allows us to address problems at the places where they begin. Third was the National Incident Command Center to manage that on a daily basis, to look specifically at the checkpoint screening operations, and then a daily phone call with the each airport, federal security director, and the airline partners in that airport, airport by airport across the top airports.
All right. I mentioned in my opening statement that we have included in the appropriations legislation report out of committee by the Senate Appropriations Committee some additional monies for human resources, personnel resources, for dogs, K-9, and maybe for some infrastructure improvements, technology improvements. Do you still believe there's going to be needed?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Okay, that's all I need. Thanks very much. Talk to us about the role that your employees have played, in terms of, they're on the front lines, they see this stuff every day, talk to people every day. How do you ask them for their ideas, make sure that their input is gathered and actually acted on?
Well, I think we still need to work better at that, but what I've tried to do is to both anecdotally and more structured solicit information on how best to do the job that we're doing. So we bring them in on short-term details to our technology office. They work in our test facility. They give us ideas as to how to improve what we're doing. When we were looking at these automated lanes, for example, we brought some frontline TSOs up and said, how would you run this thing? So there's a lot of just great tactical knowledge that they have in their head on how to do this job better from day to day, and we're trying to capture that in a much more systematic way.
One of the ways I've always found to improve employee morale, whether it's in federal government or state or some other regard, is training. Folks on my staff love to, particularly folks in Delaware, love to come to D.C. We have specialized training for them regardless of what their jobs might be. It's not only the right for folks to go by and do a better job, but their sense of self-worth is enhanced as well. So I want to encourage you to continue to do the training that's going down at Glencoe. The other thing I want to ask you is, you talked a little bit about the range of weapons and that we find, that your folks find on passengers trying to get onto a plane, and I think you actually have an Instagram feed that displays some of those. Can you just take a minute and tell us, if you will, speak about some of the dangerous items that TSA screeners discover and carry on baggage in at the checkpoint, and of the importance of careful and effective security screening in order to identify and some of those overt threats?
Well, we've seen a lot of loaded handguns come through checkpoints. Last year, I believe it was somewhere around 2,700 handguns confiscated at checkpoints. Many of these are not just loaded, but they have rounds in the chamber. So these are weapons that are dangerous. 2 weeks ago, we had 2 smoke grenades, live smoke grenades, found in carry-on luggage coming through. You get a lot of inert items coming through, things that look like grenades, but those are of concern too, because it's, you can't tell from a distance. Quite a few knives, concealed weapons, canes with knives, with swords embedded in them, you name it, and somebody's trying to bring it through a checkpoint. Throwing stars, brass knuckles, all sorts of stuff that you just don't want on an aircraft, in an aircraft environment, given what we know to be the way some people have been acting lately.
Good. Last thing I would say is, when I was elected governor in November of '92, and along with other newly elected governors in November of '92, we went to new governor's school 2 weeks after the election. It was hosted by Roy Romer, who's then the chairman of the National Governors Association and governor of Colorado. And I learned a lot. It was like 3 days. The faculty was existing governors and their spouses, the grizzled veterans, I call them. And then there were the newbies, those who just have been elected, were governor-elects and their spouses. And one of the best lessons I learned during those 3 days was one of the governors who said, when you have a problem, when you face a problem in your state as governor, don't make a one-day problem a one-week problem or a one-month problem or a one-year problem. Own the problem. Own the problem. Take responsibility for the program. Say this is what we're going to do. We're going to fix this problem. Apologize and then do it. And when the way I watch you perform in your role as head of TSA, I'm reminded of that advice. And I don't know that you will ever be a governor, but you're certainly prepared with the training you've gone through as well. I'm going to close with the preamble of the Constitution. We're very proud of the Constitution. Delaware was the first state to ratify the Constitution. For one whole week, we were with the entire United States of America. Pretty good week. And the preamble of the Constitution begins with these words: we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. It doesn't say to form a perfect union. We didn't. We continue to amend the Constitution over time, and the idea is to always get better. How do we get better? And clearly, TSA is doing a better job. We're grateful for that. We're anxious to know how we can help make that happen even more expeditiously. We want to thank our friends at GIO and the IG's office for the good work that they're doing to help be the, if you will, the wind beneath your wings, and to say, let's keep up the good work. The last thing is we were in Africa about a year ago with our family on a family vacation. I heard this old African saying, if you want to go fast, travel alone. If you want to go far, travel together. And in this instance, this is team sport. We're going to travel together, and I think to the extent we do, we're going to go a long ways toward where we need to go. Thank you. So that other people can get where they need to go. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Carper. And again, I want to thank our witnesses, Admiral Neffenger. Really, we do appreciate the enormity of your task, the significant challenge, but I think you've really shown that you've taken some pretty great strides in that first step, admitting we got the problem, then starting to work in a very methodical, in very military fashion, quite honestly, which I think we all appreciate. Inspector Roth and Ms. Grover, again, thank you for your contribution to this effort as well. So, again, thank you for your time, your testimony, your answers to our questions. With that, the hearing record will remain open for 15 days until June 22nd at 5 p.m. For the submission of statements and questions for the record, this hearing is adjourned.